The spokesperson for the Iranian Red Crescent Society stating that Iranian media that at least 201 people have been killed across the country and more than 700 people are injured. Joining us now is Michael Singh. He's the former senior director for Middle East Affairs at the National Security Council and now the managing director and senior fellow at the Washington Institute. Michael, thank you for joining me. I got to ask you, why do you think the U.S. chose now to strike?
Well, you have to remember, Ike, we had strikes on Iran back in June of last year. Those were ended, you could argue, prematurely. Remember that President Trump called for a unilateral ceasefire after one day, and that left a lot of targets unaddressed, even though Iran's nuclear program was set back. Then in January, you had these massive protests in Iran with perhaps 30,000 people killed by the regime in the streets, and President Trump promised to come to the rescue of those protesters. That really started this current crisis where, President Trump, I think, felt like he had to, either sort of secure concessions from the regime or, frankly, do something militarily to back up the threats that he made.
Now, given your experience coordinating U.S. policy, does this align with the broader U.S. objectives in the Middle East?
Well, frankly, the concerns that President Trump outlined in his video about Iran are concerns that presidents have had with Iran really since 1979 for the most part. Its missile program, its nuclear program, its support for terrorism. In the past, we've hesitated to use military force for what we fear would be the fallout. But I think what we saw last June and over the last 2 years was that perhaps Iran was not as strong as we thought. And so I think what you're seeing now is just a lower bar, frankly, for the use of American force against those longstanding threats.
Michael, what are the biggest obstacles preventing this from becoming a prolonged conflict?
Well, I think we have two issues at play here. Number one, what exactly are the American and Israeli objectives here? Is it a limited objective like destroying Iran's missiles, destroying Iran's security services, or is the objective some kind of longer-term political objective that will be harder to achieve? When it comes to Iran's side of things, I think what we're seeing so far, Ike, is that Iran just doesn't have, so far, the retaliatory capacity to do much in the face of this U.S. action. So I think the duration will really come down to the extent and the scope of American and Israeli objectives, rather than Iran's ability to stay into the fight.
So how do you see this whole thing playing out? I mean, you've written before about sanctions to deter Iran's nuclear program. Is that something that you can see in the future?
For sure. I think it's very likely that what we'll see is, days, maybe a week of strikes targeting mostly military and security services targets, maybe leadership. And then perhaps the U.S. and Israel stepping back, hoping that that will be, as President Trump said in his video message, a sort of opportunity or the prompt for things to move inside Iran, with the leadership destabilized, for the people to rise up, or for someone to seize power. And if that doesn't happen, then we're back to sort of, in a sense, where we were before, of sort of applying pressure, trying to deter Iran, but hopefully from a better position in terms of where Iran's nuclear and missile programs stand.
But what does that look like? You said it yourself. President Trump essentially called for regime change, asking the Iranian people to step up and take over their government. How do you think those calls affect diplomacy? Do you think it'll essentially get rid of any chance for an off-ramp here?
I don't think it gets rid of any chance. But of course, look, if the regime is convinced that our objective is to topple them, that doesn't create a lot of space for compromise or for diplomacy, for sure. If they believe our objectives are more narrow or strictly focused on, say, the nuclear missile program, then obviously that changes things. But if what we want to see is the end of the regime, that's not going to be accomplished through negotiation, needless to say.
I want to talk about the impact of the wider Middle East. How could this affect the ceasefire in Gaza?
Well, I think what we're seeing now is we're seeing, obviously, Iranian attacks on Gulf states. Those are, and other states, I should say. Those are largely unsuccessful so far. We have seen sort of pledges of support for Iran by its proxies like Hezbollah, Iraqi Shia militias, but so far without any action or even a commitment to action. And so far, I would say, and of course, it's very early days, and so let's say this, with a lot of caution, we don't see that sort of, regional conflagration that a lot of people worry about. So right now, I would say no clear effect on Gaza, but let's see how this plays out over the next few days.
All right, Michael Singh, thank you for your analysis.